My name is Bond, James Bond. My instructions were implicit. I was to leave for Jamaica in 2 hours. License to kill.
Now you maybe miss it.
You don't miss a thing.
I decided to accept your invitation.
I have to leave immediately.
Just as things were getting interesting again.
Hello, welcome to the Damian and Devlin Show. This is our review of Dr. No, the 1962 movie that brought James Bond to life. That was directed by Terrence Young. It was also starring Sean Connery, Ursula Andress, Joseph Wiseman, and Jack Lord. And as I said...
And if you've never heard of anybody other than Sean Connery, don't worry, because I'm exactly the same way.
Well, I know Jack Lord from Hawaii Five-0 from the 70s.
Sure.
And Ursula Andress is one of the most famous Bond girls out there, but I don't think she did much else after that. She's
totally
just famous for that bikini scene. But
yeah.
we'll probably talk to about that, because that's probably one of the positives we have in this movie. Anyhow, this is the movie that brought James Bond to life. Ian Fleming wrote a series of books, and Casino Royale is actually the first book he ever wrote, but this was the first movie that was adapted, and it became a big...
Hold on, I'm actually going to correct you on that. Wasn't Casino Royale made for TV as like an American?
No, I think it came later, though.
Are you sure?
Yeah. This was the first Bond film.
Tell us if I'm right or if he's wrong.
Yeah, the books weren't they were just minor sellers, and they bought the rights to this, and they couldn't get anyone to give them the money for this. American studios said that it was too British, they thought it was too overly sexual, they thought it was too brash, and they just didn't want anything to do with it until United Artists gave them $1 million to make this movie. And you know what? That $1 million... turn that James Bond franchise in something that's made billions. 24 movies. And this was the first time James Bond was brought to the screen. Not only that, Dr. No was a major success, and it also brought about a series of spy movies. It also... TV shows like Man from U.N.C.L.E. came from this. And Ursula Andress's bikini made people go from 1 pieces to 2 pieces. Sales went through the roof. And so this did so much.
Thank you to that.
This is a groundbreaking movie. No matter what we think of it, it is still an important movie because it just brought Bond to life. And of course the book sales went crazy, and Ian Fleming started selling mass amounts all over the world, not just in Britain. Anyhow, that being said, what are your initial thoughts? You were the one who picked this.
I did pick Dr. No. I have seen Dr. No before, and I'm a huge James Bond fan. I love James Bond. I think the idea of the character is super cool. And I mean, when anybody really thinks of spy, they think of James Bond. Like, let's be real. 007, License to Kill. You can't get more cool than James Bond. And he's gone through a whole bunch of different iterations. There was a reboot with Daniel Craig taking over. As of this filming, he's still James Bond. But there have been so many actors that played James Bond. And just, I love the character. I love the movies. Not all of the movies. We'll touch on those maybe one day. But most of the movies I do enjoy. And I have actually read the book version of Dr. No. So I have actually read the book. And I'm not a big fan of Ian Fleming's style of writing. I found it very dry and boring. And, you know, I'll talk about how that kind of translated to the movie, but overall, it's an entertaining experience.
I agree with you. I like James Bond too. I'm not a huge James Bond fan, but I've seen the majority of the movies, and I do enjoy most of them, although I have a lot of trouble following a lot of the things, and I just assume everybody's a double agent, and then I'm not let down. That's how I go into a Bond theme. My favorite part of the Bond theme is always the opening song, and sadly, you know what? This movie has a lot of the opening tropes that set the stage for all the movies, but it didn't have that elegant, glamorous. Although I did like the dancing
The
women.
random dancing.
But, you know, give me a solid Thunderball or a Live and Let Die theme song or a Nobody Does It Better. I don't know, Jamaican Three Blind Mice just doesn't do it for me, but it was still nice, but...
I actually just thought of something that I'm going to talk about with regards to this movie. But now, I'm going to jump right into my positives.
You do that.
I told him one of my favorite James Bond scenes of all the movies happens in this movie. And he jumped right to, it's the bikini scene, isn't it? Because he thinks I'm some kind of pervert that just objectifies women all the time. How dare you, first and foremost. But no, it was not that scene. My favorite James Bond scene, one of my favorite James Bond scenes of all the movies is when we first see James Bond for the very first time. He just oozes charisma, he oozes cool, and he's sitting at a blackjack table playing blackjack, and basically we get introduced to the Bond, James Bond. And it's just so cool. He's got a cigarette like dangling out of his mouth. Sean Connery just... holy crap, the guy just bleeds machismo, and he's so awesome, so smooth, so suave, so cool. That's a positive for me right there. Sean Connery as James Bond. How can you go wrong with the original, the classic? Now, there's always that question. Who is your favorite James Bond? Now, I'll be quite honest with you. Sean Connery is not my favorite James Bond. I've found it's all really who you grew up with. Who you grew up with as Bond, that becomes your James Bond favorite from my own experience, from what I've seen. So I'm going to go out on a limb and say your favorite's not Sean Connery either.
No. It never was. I've switched it up couple times. I do love Sean Connery. I could watch Sean Connery in this movie over and over.
So the fact that he's not your favorite, though, he is not my favorite, but he still does Bond justice. He is Bond in a lot of ways. He gets the girl. He gets the job done. He is awesome. Left, right, and center. No matter what you say about him, he's cool. He's awesome. So definitely a positive for Sean Connery. I did like a lot of this movie with regards to some spy elements of it. I felt that this James Bond movie, because this is the very first James Bond movie, unless we're wrong, this is the very first one, and so I'm pretty sure there was an American one in the 50s, and they called him Jimmy Bond.
Maybe.
And it was Casino Royale, and
but it wasn't for the big screen.
No, I think it was a made-for-TV
I think you're
movie.
thinking of the David Niven one, and that was in the 60s, later 60s.
Okay, maybe. I may be wrong. But regardless, this is the first time the world at large was introduced to James Bond. So it felt more realistic, if you know what I mean, with regards to the later Roger Moore craziness ones, and then even even going further than that, some Pierce Brosnan James Bond films as well. What is it? Day After... Not the Day
Tomorrow
After.
Never Dies.
Tomorrow Never Dies. Die Another Day. That's what I'm talking about.
Die Another Day, yes.
Ridiculousness. But this one, it seemed like it's shrouded in realism to a point. Like, when James Bond later on in the movie, he's in a tunnel, he actually braces himself like special forces are trained to do. And just the whole simplicity of it. We know James Bond movies going forward had Q, and Q would always give him a gadget of some sort that's hidden in a pen or hidden in his shoe. Whereas in this one, he's just handed a Walther PPK. And like, use this gun. That's all you need, is this gun. And that's what he does. So I think that's really good for a positive, is that it's grounded in realism. It got wacky as it goes on. Not all of them, but most of them got a pretty wacky, but I like the fact that this one's grounded in realism. I do have to say, as well, I liked the fact that within the early James Bond, and this goes from Dr. No to From Russia with Love, and I think even after that, the third one, was that Thunderball or was that Goldfinger? The third one.
I can't remember. I'm going to say Goldfinger.
I think you might be right. Regardless, whatever the third one was, it seemed like they had like some sort of consistency within it, because at the very
they were making them like year after year.
Yeah.
Like, they were coming out quite quickly.
And there was references to each other movie, which I liked. It seemed like a Bond universe at that point, where you actually had characters from one movie carry over, like Bond's girlfriend in this one at the very beginning of the movie actually appears in the beginning of From Russia with Love, as well as the organization Spectre is a consistent theme for a very long time. I liked that before it started to just be basically one-off standoff films.
Yeah.
So I like the fact that
I think
this
Spectre shows up quite a lot, like right into the Roger Moore stuff and it came back around in Daniel Craig. And
very much into the Roger Moore years. So I like that consistency. So I like the fact that this movie basically plants the foundation of all of that. That's all I really have to say, to be quite honest. Ursula Andress, yes. Her iconic coming out of the water scene with her bikini. Mwah! Beautiful. She's gorgeous. And I wish there was a little bit more to see of her, to be quite honest, because she is a very attractive lady. But that's all I really have to say about the positives for Dr. No. Oh, the soundtrack, of course. Doom, 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 doom. Like, that's awesome, too.
Yeah, my positives will start, because you said most of them. It's funny, Sean Connery is not my favorite Bond, but I do like him a lot. I actually think he's more attractive than my former favorite Bond. But he does pull it off. I think he's got a suaveness that, even though I kind of like the Roger Moore movies for the goofiness, I actually think Sean Connery is more James Bond-ish, like looking and everything. There were rumors that Roger Moore was actually asked to do this first, but Roger Moore said that they thought about him, but he was way too young at the time, which is weird because I think Roger Moore's older than Sean Connery. But actually their first person was Cary Grant, and that would have been really weird to have an American play that. But anyhow, I'm glad they got Sean Connery, so that is a plus. I like the look of the feel of this film. It's not like they're trying. This was stuff in the 60s, but they were using very contemporary stuff. I love seeing, men walk around in suits.
Mm-hmm.
They're in Jamaican weather, hot, and they're wearing like full long sleeve shirts.
Yeah.
You don't see like him in like his culottes or something till later on. But I love that kind of stuff, and I love just seeing all the retro of it, like just the old like big radios that they're transmitting on. It's fun to see, and that's a plus for me. It reminds you of the early days of like you said, it's a great first thing. The thing I love most is how this first movie captures so much of what becomes James Bond lore, like from the music, like his theme song. It's right there at the beginning. It's not something they had to figure out. Yes, they added theme songs, but they got his theme song, not just like the theme song to the movies. Also, like just like the villains, just the big layers and stuff like that. The fact that he likes his drinks, shaken, not stirred, right in there. Money pennies, right in there at the beginning, and like it just. So much of what we know of James Bond is all introduced in that first movie. And so I give that a plus. There's some nice directing moments in it. There is some clunky stuff, but...
talk about clunky.
But we'll get to that in the negatives. My positives, beautiful locales.
That's it.
Oh, yeah, one thing I will say, I will have some problems with the script, but I did like that there was a lot of good one-liners that Bond has, and he nails them. Even if I don't even think they're that great, Sean Connery has a way to make you think they're amazing. Even if you're like, if anybody else said that, he probably couldn't have pulled it off. But he's really good at that. So the script has some nice one-liners in it. And why don't you jump into your negatives?
So I don't agree with you at all with regard to the director. I think the edits in this movie are absolutely horrible.
There's some jumps.
There's
like some flickers or something. Flickers. And it's like, did they just like...
They jump cut.
Yeah. But I said he had some nice moments. I didn't say... Remember, I always start with the director, and I did not. There should tell you something there.
So yeah, there's like jump cuts, there's flickers, like you could tell they were filming a scene, something must have gone wrong, so they tried to film it again, but tried to make it seem like it was the same consistent cut. It just looks horrible, and it's kind of like shocking and jarring when it happens, because you're like, alright, so I'm supposed to feel tension during this attack on Bond, but then suddenly it jumps. I'm like, okay, what? Like, did the guy slip on a banana peel or something and they had to redo the scene? So I don't like the editing with this movie at all. I found the fact that as well, and you know what, I totally get it. It's a product of its time, 1962. But the green screens were just ridiculous at times.
But I have to give them credit. They only used it a few times.
That's fair.
But they really should have concentrated on using them.
So there's a green screen where Bond's driving a car and he's being chased by another car. And the green screen is way out of whack with regards to the size. You see the cars.
It's the same genetics as the fish.
So you see the cars driving down the road at high speed, and they're relatively the same size. But when you see Bond in the cockpit of the car looking behind him, the car that's chasing him has become like 10 times the size that it should be. So ridiculous. And then, yes, those genetic fish.
Yeah, that was...
So they walk into...
I want to see what the sharks looked like, if that was like the minnows or whatever they were saying.
They walk into Dr. No's lair, and then they're looking at this screen, like, oh my gosh, that's really interesting. And at first you're like, is that like a TV screen? Or like, what are we looking
magnified
at?
fish.
The fish are huge, and you can literally tell it's these tiny little guppies that have been blown up.
But they do explain it in the script, but I'm not sure if it was that nuclear cube that they were using was making them. That's what I think. That's what I got from it.
I don't know. And then I totally... So I disagree with you with regards to the director, but I agree with you with regards to the script. The plot in this movie is ridiculous. Like, we got to the finale and we're like, what is Dr. No trying to do? We had no idea what his plan was. He's like, you're trying to tempt me, Mr. Bond. It's not going to work. Like, tempt you to do what? Like, what are you trying to do, buddy? Like, I get it. Bad guys, the villains, they all love talking about their plans. Maybe this should have been one of those times because nobody knows what you're trying to do. It was ridiculously frustrating. And Bond apparently knew what he was trying to do and stopped it just in the nick of time. But, geez... What's going on here? As well, you mentioned that Jamaican 3 blind mice.
Oh, yeah.
What happened to them? Where did they go? So there's these 3 like assassins sent to kill Bond. They kill major characters, which causes the plot to happen. But they disappear.
The most subtle, unsubtle assassins. They're dressed as pimps and... And they're just like right out and open, just with guns on the car. Like blind men could see them.
Where did they go, though? Like, did they suddenly develop blindness for real and get lost? Where did they go? So I hate that plot hole as well in the script. But the most annoying thing about this movie, and I can never get over it, is there is an unnecessary death. So they're all talking about a dragon on this island. Oh. And they're on the island and they meet this dragon. And then so they start shooting at the dragon. And then one of the characters literally could have left. It's like the scene from Austin Powers where the guy's like, no, for 10 minutes. He could have moved. He could have lived. Like, just unavoidable. Completely. Stupid writing. That's what it is. It falls apart. It really does. Like the first part, it sets it cool. We're getting a legitimate, authentic kind of feeling spy movie, and then it just kind of falls apart. Like, nobody knows what's going on, except Bond, apparently, because he's brilliant. Fantastic. Fantastic. As well, forgettable characters, left, right, and center. Like, sure, you got James Bond, and unless you know the series like I do, you would not know what the name of the CIA agent is that helps him. You would not know the name of the local guy that helps him. You don't even... well, to be fair, okay, you will know the name of Ursula Andress's character, Honey Ryder. I mean, how do you forget that? How do you forget that name? That is just brilliant. But, oh, yeah, no. And then, I'm going to let you go into detail about this. But the finale fight scene with Dr. No is the most ridiculously
well, we can't give it away, but you're right, it is bad.
It's anticlimactic to the max. And I was like, okay, well, there goes Dr. No, goodbye. Thanks for showing up.
They spend all this time, like, what a badass Dr. No is. Like, they build tension. You don't even see him. You just hear of his exploits. Then you meet him, and he's got a bit of mystery to him. And then his end is just... so lame.
Yeah.
Like, it's like, you should have bought some henchmen or something. Cause...
he had hundreds of them, including the guy that showed up to work without the proper uniform.
Yeah.
Fucking Michelin Man.
So are you done with your negatives?
Yeah.
Okay, the script is the biggest problem with this. You know, I always feel a little dumb going into James Bond movies. I love watching the action and the romance and all that stuff, but I always feel like, have I missed something in the movie? And this movie, I kept like, I'm really going to pay attention. I'm going to follow this Bond movie. And I'm like, oh my God, I don't know what's going on. And I'm thinking, I won't tell Damian because he's going to think I'm an idiot or something. And then this man who's read the book, who's seen the movie a couple of times, says to me, do you even know what Dr. No is doing? And I'm thinking, is he just trying to catch me? And he's like, no, he doesn't know what's going on. Some nuclear thing, I don't even know.
I don't know.
As I said, when I go into a Bond film, I just assume everybody's a double agent, and I don't even try to follow what they're doing. It's just going to involve some kind of missile, satellite, some kind of new science fiction-y stuff.
Nukes.
You know, so and there's just so many little mistakes. Now, I give them credit. This is the first one. They only had $1 million budget. But there's stuff that's, every time something's retro cool, it kind of gets diminished. Like Bond's in a cell, and he goes to touch this screen, and he literally, I've seen the movie before, and it shocks him. And I think, oh, that's cool. They got like, and then you look up and it's destroyed already. So he basically takes it off. Then he goes through a tunnel, gets to the other side. He's reluctant. He touches it. Nothing happens. He kicks it out. 30 seconds later, he's like doing something. Somebody blatantly would have walked by and saw that, but they act like they, oh no, just a normal day at the job in my underground Jamaican lab or wherever they were. And like literally Bond gets the jump on him when there's blatantly something there. There's lots of little things. And that's kind of what makes this movie fun. Like if you have a friend like I watched with this, we got giggles out of the things that were like, like Bond's being brought in handcuffs.
And then Honey's just got her knife.
Right.
She's got her knife.
They're letting her have her knife still.
My
because
favorite.
It's the 60s and she's a woman. She can't offer any danger. Like, what is
my
this?
favorite when they're on the boat, the henchmen are on the boat, and they're thinking they know that Bond and the gang are there, so they're like, come out, we know you're here, come out, you have 10 seconds, okay, we're going to shoot you now. And then after they're done shooting, okay, you can come out now. Like, who's gonna come out?
Yeah, or they're not confident on their shooting skills.
Come out so we can shoot you properly, please.
So the script is a bit of a mess. As I said, they got some really nice dialogue in there, but the action sequence are almost laughable. Like they're the end of Dr. No is the most anticlimactic thing. Like I think the parodies of Austin Powers had better fight sequences.
They totally did.
And so that was thing. My only other really problem with this movie, and I know it's 1962, and I have respect for older movies. But I didn't realize just how slow this movie is. Like everything to get to an informant, he has to meet two other informants, and then it just seems like there's a scene I'm not a particular fan of. I actually turned my head.
Tarantulas.
I don't like tarantulas. So Damian let me know when it was on. But I kept thinking when I wasn't looking, it was like they got the slowest animal even to take it because they thought a snail wouldn't be intimidating enough. So it's like, we can't get a fast snake. We're going to put a tarantula. And
next time they're going to pull a sloth out.
So I just found it very slow. But you know what? I understand movies like that are like that. But again, there's enough fun and enough retro that still makes this movie enjoyable. And you've got to give it its kudos because of the fact that it's the one that started it all off. And yeah,
it is a cultural milestone. Like, don't get me wrong.
Right.
It's a total cultural milestone, and without it, we would not have gotten amazing movies like From Russia with Love, which was 10 times much better than this.
So they were learning from mistakes and stuff. But I have to say to the younger generation, if you're grown up with the Daniel Craig movies, which are just, even if you don't like the movies, they still have wonderful action sequences, and you decide, I'm going to go right to the beginning, just remember you're going into the 60s when we hadn't figured out a lot of that stunt coordination and stuff. So you might take a few naps during this.
Maybe.
So, and it's not even a long movie. This is probably the shortest Bond movie too.
Yeah.
Which I'm kind of thankful. I think some of the Bond movies are a little long.
2.5 hours normal,
Yeah.
but this one was about under 2 hours.
Yeah, the first couple I think are around the 2-hour mark.
Yeah,
But, so before we give our things, you never really said who your favorite Bond is.
Oh.
And I think you made a great point. I think your favorite Bond is the one you're grown up with, and when we say our favorites, now I have switched.
Oh, have you?
But my original one was the one I saw the first Bond movie. My first Bond film was Moonraker. And now, I know a lot of people think Moonraker's crazy, but you got to remember, I was a kid coming off Star Wars. I saw it at the theater, so it was big. They were in a space station. And so Roger Moore, and when I even went back to watch, like, crazy, like Live and Let Die, these are my favorite movies. So I remember people used to ask me, and I'd say, I like Sean Connery, and then I'd realize all my favorite Bond movies were Roger Moore movies. But I actually like Daniel Craig's movies now. I think Daniel Craig has now taken over Bond for me.
All right, fair enough. My favorite James Bond is always going to be Pierce Brosnan. I grew up in the 90s, and the very first Bond movie I saw was GoldenEye, which was released in '95, and it was Pierce Brosnan's first go at Bond, and I think he just nailed it 100% because he had everybody influencing. He had Sean Connery's smooth and suaveness. He had a little bit of Roger Moore's sense of humor. He had Timothy Dalton's edge. He was just perfect at it. I don't mention George Lazenby because he should never be mentioned. He's terrible and would never, ever, ever stand the test of time as James Bond. Don't get me started on George Lazenby either because you know how bad I can get. He ruined Bond, and thankfully...
Actually, no, I think Sean Connery kind of misstepped that because from what I remember, that's actually one of the better Bond scripts. And the fact that Sean Connery stepped out on that script and had us with a brand new Bond...
Are you defending George Lazenby?
No, I'm upset that Sean Connery did not even say yes to a great script.
So don't get me wrong. I love the script for that movie.
Yes.
I hate George Lazenby.
Yes, and you can, but I'm saying I would blame Sean Connery more because he should have stayed with the franchise at that point.
We'll argue semantics when we get to that.
Imagine how amazing that movie would have been with Sean Connery.
1,000 times better. 1,000 times.
We touched on it all. You touched on it. Both, I think we had this conversation before. We both agree that Timothy Dalton should have got a little bit more love.
Yes.
I think Living Daylights,
absolutely,
really one of the most. I actually thought Timothy Dalton was an amazing one. I actually like Timothy Dalton more than Pierce Brosnan, but don't tell Damian.
That's all right. That's acceptable.
Yeah.
Because honestly, my Bonds, Pierce Brosnan, Timothy Dalton, right underneath Brosnan, because Dalton brought the edge that Bond needed. He was tired. He was angry. Nothing he ever did really seemed to change anything, and Timothy Dalton nailed it. So I will accept that.
All right. Ratings.
2.5.
Doctor, you're going 2.5?
2.5.
You know, you were the one who suggested this movie.
It was slow. It was kind of boring at the beginning, and then the end was just ridiculous. And I had no idea what was going on. But because of the cultural milestone, because Sean Connery is just so awesome at his role, 2.5. 2.5.
I'm going to go a little higher to 3, just because I did still enjoy it. I still love the style of the 60s. I love the stuff that you couldn't get away with. Like, how many times were we saying, yeah, you couldn't get away with that in a Bond movie now? Just the way Bond was walking around carrying his machismo.
The fact that he becomes a little bit of a rapist in later movies.
Yeah, we won't go there. But so I'll give it a 3 because I did find it still enjoyable, even though it was slow. I just try to remember the era it was made in. But I think it was good enough to get a little bit higher for me. So we're close, though.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us for Dr. No. Definitely don't say no to a subscription, as well as check the links in the comments below for Facebook, podcasts, and everything else that comes along with your favorite duo. Thank you so much for joining us. Stay tuned. Damian and Devlin will return. No, that was not a jump cut edit.
The exotic and tantalizing Dr. No.
Some people will go to any extremes for a little privacy.
I sound more like Sean Connery than you.
Bond. James Bond.
What's that? Pushy galore.
Listen, you gotta get in that boat right now.
What is that?